Hi, I'm Virel. My stepmother changed the locks the night we buried my father. She said it was for security, but what she really meant was, "You're not family anymore." I stood outside, holding nothing but a folded napkin my mother once taught me to shape like a leaf. Inside, she was already spending the inheritance that was meant for me. They erased photos, sold off my name. But what they didn't know is that my father had left me something they couldn't touch. Have you ever been pushed out, only to return with everything they tried to bury? Before we dive in, where are you listening from and what time is it? Drop a comment below. I read everyone. The sky was still that low, heavy gray, the kind that holds more silence than clouds. Charleston felt thick with humidity that day, like grief had a temperature, and it clung to your skin. I hadn't changed out of my funeral dress. Black crepe, sweat streaked down the back. I just wanted to go home, shower, sit in Mom's old rocker on the porch, and let it hurt where it hurt. Instead, I stood at the wrought iron gate, blinking in confusion, then disbelief, then something far colder. The keypad blinked red. I tried it again, pressing the same 6 digits I'd been using since high school. Mom's birthday. No response. I looked up. The security camera on the corner blinked, little red dot glowing like an insult. I checked the key in my purse, half hoping this was some glitch. The key didn't turn. Not even a budge. Taped to the front door in neatly spaced lettering. "Please contact Isolde for access. The home is being secured." Secured. Like a storage unit. Like something abandoned and boxed up. I called her. 1 ring, 2. On the 3rd, she answered. I didn't even get my name out, just, "Hi, Isolde's voice came flat and unbothered. "I didn't think you'd come back tonight." Pause. I could hear clinking. Glass, maybe. Voices in the background. "Maybe sleep elsewhere?" she added. "I just think it's best." "No, how are you?" "No, sorry. Just a gentle shove, like I was never supposed to return anyway." I looked at the porch swing through the narrow iron bars. My porch swing, where Mom used to fold laundry, where Dad read the paper. I wasn't allowed inside, not anymore. I didn't cry. I didn't even curse. I just stood there. My body refused to move, like if I stayed long enough, maybe the locks would change back. Instead, it started to drizzle. I sat down on the porch step, back against brick, the dress soaking at the hem. No umbrella, no jacket. I opened my purse. Dead phone. I had forgotten to charge it after the reception. I reached into my side pocket and found it, folded with care, tucked between old tissues and gum wrappers. The napkin. A simple cotton napkin, faded blue, pressed into the shape of a southern leaf. Mama used to fold them like that when I was little. "Even paper can be tender," she'd say, showing me again and again, her hands slow, deliberate, gentle. I held it like it meant something more than linen. Maybe it did. The porch light clicked off overhead. My chest tightened. That light had been motion sensor for years. Someone was inside, someone watching, and they didn't want me here. Across the street, I saw the window curtain twitch. A figure, tall, straight-backed, reached up and pulled it closed. No wave, no explanation. I stood, shaking the water from my shoulders, clutching the napkin like armor. The sidewalk shimmered with rain and streetlight. I walked. No umbrella, shoes soaked in under 10 steps. Half a mile down, I recognized the clapboard siding of Merrick's house, my father's cousin. Not close family, but the kind that showed up for baptisms and barbecues. I knocked once, then again. When the porch light flicked on, I nearly turned and walked off. But the door opened. "Merrick?" I asked, voice rasping from cold. He blinked at me, hair wild from sleep. "Virel?" "Lord, child. What happened?" I didn't have words. Just lifted the napkin. He didn't ask more. Just let me in. Later that night, curled on the couch under one of his scratchy wool blankets, I stared at the ceiling, listening to the tick of the wall clock and the faint hum of the refrigerator. My stomach turned with the weight of everything unspoken. 2 months ago, over dinner, Dad had leaned across the table and said, You've got the mind for law, Virel. That'll protect you someday. I had laughed then, thought he was just being proud. It was the last time he looked me in the eye with that kind of faith. That line would follow me everywhere now. Sometime after midnight, I got up to get water. I stood by Merrick's front window and looked across the street, down the block. The house was still dark, but I knew it was occupied. My house, now someone else's stage. I caught myself whispering, not even meaning to. So this is what stepfamily means. 2 days after the funeral, I found myself standing in the lobby of a law office that smelled like lemon polish and old leather. The receptionist didn't smile when I gave my name. She just nodded and pointed toward the elevator like I was part of the routine. Another client, another transaction. But nothing about this felt routine. My black dress still hung in Merrick's spare closet. I'd managed to piece together an outfit from borrowed clothes, hair pulled back tight, face dry but pale. I'd slept little. When I looked in the mirror that morning, I barely recognized the woman staring back. Inside the conference room, Mr. Dempsey, a sharp man with wire-rimmed glasses and a voice like gravel, was already seated. Isolde sat opposite him, lips painted the same wine red as the last time she kissed my father's cheek. Valora, a cousin from my mother's side, lounged beside her in a beige pantsuit, tapping her nails on a Starbucks cup. 2 more distant relatives I barely knew flanked the far end of the table, observers or witnesses. "Please sit," Dempsey said. I took the chair at the end, slightly lower than the others, or maybe it just felt that way. He opened a folder, adjusted his glasses. The estate of Charles D. Latimer is valued at approximately $2.1 million. That includes real estate, securities, and 2 trusts. Per the terms of the will, those assets are to be allocated to Miss Virel Latimer under full guardianship until the age of 18. My throat clenched. I was 17, 3 months shy of majority. I knew this, but hearing it read aloud in that tone, with so many eyes on me, it felt like I was back in grade school waiting for the teacher to hand out detention slips. Isolde didn't wait a beat. "I think we should reconsider this." Dempsey blinked. "I'm sorry?" "She's too young to manage that kind of responsibility," Isolde said, turning her head slightly toward me but not enough to meet my eyes. "Grief makes people impulsive. It's not her fault." Valora chimed in, smiling as if she were passing around dessert. "She's always been a bit quick to react. No offense, Virel." The room chuckled, a dry, polite sort of laugh, like they were enjoying an inside joke I hadn't been invited to. I stared at the table, my fingers curled into fists beneath it, nails digging into my palms. "I'm right here," I said quietly. No one responded. Dempsey cleared his throat and continued. "Temporary custodianship is standard until the legal age. The papers will name Isolde as custodian for now." He passed the documents across the table. Isolde took them with a graceful smile, glancing sideways at me like a hostess welcoming a troublesome guest. "Of course I'll protect what's hers," she said. Then she looked me dead in the eye. "Until she's ready to be reasonable." Something in me cracked. It wasn't what she said. It was how she said it, like I was a problem to be managed, not a daughter to be loved. The lawyer said something else after that. More clauses, more legalese. I didn't hear it. My ears buzzed with that single word, reasonable, the kind of word people use when they mean obedient. The meeting ended. In the elevator, the hum of fluorescent lights and the slow slide of metal made the air feel thick. Isolde stood beside me, scrolling her phone. When we hit the ground floor, she looked up and said, "You should thank me." I turned, startled. She didn't smile. "Without me, you'd have nothing but that napkin." The doors opened. She stepped out. I stayed inside, standing still as the elevator closed around me like a coffin. I didn't cry, but I gripped my bag so tightly my knuckles turned white. By late afternoon, I was back on Merrick's porch. The sun had dipped low, casting long shadows across the floorboards. My phone had 1 bar of battery left. I called my dad's old friend, the one he used to fish with, the one who'd sworn to always have your back, kiddo. His assistant picked up. "He's in Spain on business," she said. "Back next month." Can "Can you tell him Varel called?" "Of course," she replied politely. But I knew she wouldn't. I didn't leave a message. I stared at the black screen for a long moment before letting it fall to my lap. That night I lay on the couch again, staring at the ceiling, eyes dry but burning. I wasn't just grieving anymore. They hadn't just taken my place in the house, they were trying to rewrite who I was. It wasn't just about the money anymore, it was about who they thought I was. And that night, with the city humming quietly outside Merrick's apartment window, I decided I'd stop letting other people finish my story. I was still in black. My funeral dress hung from my shoulders like it was part of my skin now, stiff with grief, but I didn't take it off. I didn't move much, just sat cross-legged on the couch, one throw blanket tangled around my ankles. Merrick's apartment was modest, just a 2-bedroom walk-up near Colonial Lake. It smelled faintly like old books and cedar floor polish, and the radiator clicked every few minutes like it was reminding me I wasn't home. My friend had stepped out to give me space. Kind but unnecessary. I didn't cry. I didn't even blink much. What I did do was reach into the inside pocket of my coat and pull out the napkin. The same one I'd clutched on the porch that first night. It was still folded like a leaf, just the way my mother taught me to do years ago for Thanksgiving, saying, "Always leave beauty behind, even if you're only setting a table." I rubbed the fabric between my fingers, and just like that, memory hit me hard. I was 16 again. Dad had just come home from a long client meeting, briefcase in one hand, grocery bag in the other. We were seated at the kitchen table. I still had braces back then, a scab on my chin from soccer practice. He laid out a stack of papers with a sort of heaviness in his shoulders. "These are the trust documents," he said. "We'll finalize them next quarter, but I wanted you to see them now. Understand what they mean." I didn't know much about money then, but I knew the way his eyes softened when he looked at me. I trusted that. He tapped the first page and added, "Don't sign anything without asking me first, not even if it looks harmless." I nodded, not knowing how important that moment would become, not knowing that less than a week later, Isolde would try something that still makes my skin crawl. I'd come home from school. Isolde was in the sunroom, glass of white wine in hand, hair pulled back perfectly. She had a few papers laid out. "Your father wants you to be familiar with this stuff," she said with a casual smile. "Why don't you sign here just for record-keeping?" I remember holding the pen. I remember the slight pressure behind her voice, how her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. That's when Dad walked in. He paused, eyes flicking from the papers to me. "You're not ready," he said firmly, "and she shouldn't be asking." He didn't raise his voice. He didn't accuse. He just looked at her like he knew, and she folded the papers back up, still smiling, but tight, like it cracked her jaw to do it. That moment drifted out of my mind for 2 years, until now. Now, it screamed. Back in the apartment, I opened my phone. The screen lit up, cracked in the corner from the funeral drop. I scrolled back through old folders, screenshots, emails. I didn't know what I was looking for exactly, but grief had sharpened into focus. I wasn't just sad anymore. I was awake. Then I found it. A photo I had taken that same week. I was 16, wearing a hoodie with sleeves pulled over my hands. I was seated at the table, pen in hand, halfway through a scribble. Isolde was in the background, smiling at the camera, wide, triumphant, like she was sealing a deal. I zoomed in. The paper I held wasn't a school form. It was one of the trust documents. I opened another folder, one I hadn't looked at in months. It held scanned PDFs from my dad's estate planning email. Legal stuff. I wasn't a lawyer, but I knew enough to match the headers, and something caught my eye, identical phrasing in both. A clause that would have shifted control if I had signed. Repeated language, like she had help drafting it, like she'd been planning it. I opened a blank spreadsheet and started making notes. Page numbers, dates, who was present, screenshots. The smell of betrayal has no scent, but it fills a room anyway. My heart beat calmly now. This wasn't fear, this was focus. "She didn't panic when he died," I murmured aloud. "She prepared." And that napkin. That napkin had kept me from handing her the key. I recorded a short voice note on my phone. It was simple, no shaking in my voice. "You told him to be careful. I think it's time we talk." Then I attached the old photo, captioned the email with 3 words she tried it before. I hit send. Merrick's name sat at the top of my screen for a long time, under the Sent tab. I kept staring, like somehow I'd see a reply form in real time. But nothing came. Still, the silence wasn't empty. It held promise. The first time she almost won because I didn't know better. This time I knew where to start. But I didn't know how deep it already ran. 2 days later, I found myself sitting across from Mr. Dempsey's new paralegal in the estate attorney's office. She was young, sharp-looking, sipping iced coffee like it was fuel. I told them I was there to request a formal review of the asset breakdown again, just to make sure everything aligned with my father's wishes. That was the phrase I used. Soft, non-threatening. The paralegal excused herself to grab the backup printouts from the archive room. I waited. The folder on her desk lay open, one corner tucked under her notebook, the pages angled just right for the light to catch a yellow highlighter mark. I hadn't meant to read it, at first, but the number jumped out. $4,800, charged to a boutique in Savannah I recognized, a place known for handmade Italian leather and linen wraps. I leaned closer. Beneath the charge was the recipient's name, Isolde. The description field read, "Client support, estate expenses." My jaw tensed. Support. Like shoes? The door clicked behind me. I sat back quickly as the paralegal returned with a file box. She smiled, oblivious, and slid into her chair. I thanked her, nodded at the new documents she'd gathered, and asked for copies. All business. I left without saying a word about the charge, but inside, something snapped. My father taught me to look for patterns. 1 expense is a mistake, he used to say. 2 is strategy. I made one stop before heading back across town, a dry cleaner, to pick up one of his old jackets. It still smelled faintly like pine and pencil shavings, and when I pressed my hand into the pocket, the napkin was still there, folded perfectly, a silent reminder. Later that afternoon, I called the house. No answer. So I tried the housekeeper directly, Mrs. Gwen. She'd been with us since I was 12. Her voice was gentle, careful. "Miss Varell," she said, "I was just about to finish laundry." "Do you mind if I stop by for a few things?" I asked. "Just my mom's journals. Maybe that blue scarf from the hallway drawer." There was a pause. "I suppose that's fine if you're quick. Mrs. Isolde, she's out." She didn't say where Isolde had gone. I drove over in quiet. Charleston's late afternoon sky hung low and still. Cicadas hummed somewhere beneath the azaleas. The gate was unlocked, the driveway empty. Mrs. Gwen opened the side door, wiped her hands on her apron, and said nothing. She stepped aside, letting me in. I made my way to the living room. The air inside felt unfamiliar, too clean, too scrubbed. And then I saw it. Where my mother's portrait once hung above the fireplace, a painting of her laughing in the garden, sunlight threading through her curls, there was now a minimalist print of gray ocean rocks, stacked, cold, anonymous. "Where's the portrait?" I asked, trying to keep my voice even. Gwen hesitated. "Mrs. Isolde said she didn't want to keep items from the old life." I turned. "The journals? Her scarves?" Gwen just shook her head once. Softly. I searched anyway. The hallway drawers, the cedar chest, upstairs, the guest room, the closet where my mother used to hide Christmas gifts. Nothing. It wasn't just things that were gone, it was like she never existed at all. On the way out, I caught my reflection in the hallway mirror. I looked pale, not angry, just missing. That night, I curled up back on Merrick's couch with my laptop. No TV, no music, just me and the hum of traffic outside. Then my phone buzzed. It was a notification. Valora had posted a photo, brunch at the country club. Isolde sat in the center. Valora on her left, Valora's mother, who hadn't spoken to me since Dad's funeral, on her right. The caption, 3 generations of strong women. My name wasn't there. One user had commented, What about Varel? Valora replied, She's going through a phase. Some girls take longer to let go of grief. A phase? Grief? My thumb hovered over the screen. I didn't comment. I didn't react. I closed the app. Instead, I opened a new folder on my desktop, named it Inheritance Watch. In it, I saved everything: screenshots of the purchase logs, the brunch post, the scanned receipt from Savannah. I started labeling dates, names, file names with underscores, just like my father used to organize his contracts. Then I opened my email. 2. Merrick subject. She's cleaning the walls. I won't wait any longer. Attached the receipt. Embedded the image of the fireplace, before and after. No words, except this line in the body. They're erasing her. Then I reached into my bag and set the napkin beside my laptop. It was time to stop hoping they'd come around. I wasn't ready for court yet, but I was done staying silent in my own name. The moment I hit send on that last email, a strange stillness washed over me. Not peace. No, nothing so clean. More like the quiet before thunder. I sat back on the couch, the soft hum of Merrick's old ceiling fans spinning above me. I stared at the leaf-folded napkin beside my laptop and whispered, almost to it, "Now it begins." Sunday morning came with a stubborn haze hanging over Charleston, the kind that makes every breath feel like it's holding something back. I needed air, movement, something that felt like action without declaring war. Yet, that's how I ended up at Fern Hollow Garden Center. It was owned by a family friend, and I remembered my father used to buy Mother's birthday orchids there, delicate, impossible things she'd keep alive for years. I wasn't there for nostalgia this time. I spotted Isolde near the back greenhouse. She wore oversized sunglasses and a sleeveless silk blouse too crisp for humidity. She was examining a violet phalaenopsis orchid with a tenderness I knew was performative. Not even the potting soil dared cling to her. I didn't approach slowly. I walked straight up. "You need to stop using my mother's money like it was gifted to you," I said, without preamble. "We both know it wasn't." Isolde turned her head, slowly, like she was expecting a breeze and got a storm front instead. She didn't look surprised. She looked ready. "Oh, Varel," she sighed, brushing a non-existent speck from her shoulder. "You think this is about handbags? I lost my husband. I'm barely breathing." I waited, watched her face. Not a single crack. The tone was right. The pause between words. Even the placement of her hand against her chest. It was rehearsed grief. Well polished. Probably used at least twice already this week. "You're grieving by spending what isn't yours," I said evenly, "and by erasing everything that was hers." She turned her gaze to the orchids again. "I know how hard loss makes people lash out," she murmured. "I won't hold your words against you." And just like that, she flipped the script. She wasn't the woman siphoning money through boutiques. She was the patient widow, the misunderstood second wife, enduring cruelty from the ungrateful stepdaughter. I walked away. I didn't trust myself to say more without raising my voice, and I wouldn't give her the show she clearly craved. By the time I got back to the apartment, my phone was already pinging. Notifications, dozens. Valora had posted a photo of Isolde beside the orchids, dabbing her eye with a tissue, head bowed in supposed sorrow. The caption read, "Praying for Aunt Isolde today. Some people grieve by attacking others. She's doing her best." The comments made my stomach turn. She's such a strong woman. She raised Varel after her mother passed, didn't she? Unbelievable what people will do for money. I clenched the phone in my hand. No one knew the truth, but everyone had an opinion. No one saw me as the daughter, just a complication. For a moment, I hovered over the comment box. I typed, "You didn't lose your husband. You lost your mask." I stared at it. The blinking cursor. The weight of those words. Then I deleted it. Let them have their narrative. I'd build mine, brick by brick, with evidence they couldn't screenshot away. That evening, Merrick's reply finally came. A voice message, encrypted and untraceable. "I've seen this kind of grief-mongering before," he said, voice low, the kind of tone that made you lean in. "Document everything. They'll try to flip it on you. Don't argue in public. It gives them fuel." There was a pause, then, "I'd bet my firm that they're already shifting assets. You don't have time to wait." I sat with that silence for a long time. This wasn't grief. This was fraud, in pearls. I opened my laptop again, updated the spreadsheet, added the garden center receipt, the brunch photo, the Facebook post. Every lie, every performance, they went into the record. One day, I'd stack them so high they'd collapse under their own weight. I didn't cry that night, but I didn't sleep much either. Instead, I stared at my reflection in the window, backlit by the soft glow of my screen. I looked tired, but I also looked sharper than I had in years. I had tried to reason. Next, I would move to reclaim. By dawn, I'd stopped rereading Merrick's message and started listening to my own breath, slow, steady, but louder than it should have been. I wasn't just afraid of losing something anymore, I was afraid of how much they'd already taken without anyone noticing. Monday morning in Charleston doesn't feel like war. The sky was a calm, hazy blue. The streets moved at their usual rhythm. But I walked through the courthouse doors like I was stepping into a battlefield. The Charleston County Courthouse smelled of pine cleaner and stale arguments. I wore the same black dress from the funeral. It was the only one formal enough, and I didn't have the money or mood to buy another. The clerk behind the counter looked up and paused mid-stamp. "You're the daughter?" I nodded, placing the documents on the counter. The only one not lying. It came out sharper than I'd planned, but I didn't soften it. She took the forms and started flipping through. Petition to revoke custodianship, motion to request forensic audit of estate spending, a request to place temporary restrictions on discretionary trust disbursements. Legal words for one thing. Stop letting my stepmother treat my inheritance like her private bank account. When I stepped out of the building 20 minutes later, the humidity hit harder. It wasn't just sweat on my back. It was pressure. I'd gone from the invisible girl to a legal threat, and I knew they'd feel it by lunch. From downtown, I took a lift to the family house. I had asked for permission to collect what few things were left in my old bedroom: photographs, journals, the lavender scarf my mother used to wrap around her hair after dinner. The gate still recognized my code. That somehow made the silence inside feel colder. No footsteps, no perfume trail. Just the buzz of central air and a hollow quiet that felt arranged. My room was empty. Drawers yanked out, mattress stripped, closet hollow. Even the storage bins beneath the bed were gone. The linen closet down the hall, bare. The art on the walls, replaced. The hallway photos, gone. On my door was a single note, printed in 14-point font. "We assumed you'd already taken what mattered." I stood there for a full minute before turning slowly and heading toward the study. The safe was gone. So was the desktop computer. The filing cabinet had been moved, dust outlines marked where it used to stand. It was no longer just emotional erasure, it was tactical. I turned toward the back of the house, following the scent of citrus cleaner when Gwen, the housekeeper, emerged from the laundry room. She didn't speak until we were near the back door, out of range of the indoor security cameras. "She had movers come in at night," she whispered. "Said not to mention it. Said you wouldn't notice." Gwen glanced around, then slipped something into my palm. A slim, silver flash drive. "I copied what I could before she wiped the system," she said, her voice barely above the hum of the dryer. I stared at the drive in my hand. "I don't know what's on it," Gwen added quickly, "but I saw them, her and Valora, talking about bank lists, taxes. I figured someone had to keep a backup." I didn't cry. I nodded, and then I hugged her. That afternoon, back at my friend's apartment, I plugged the drive into my laptop. My hands shook, but my spine held. The files loaded slowly, and then they bloomed. Emails, spreadsheets, scanned receipts. One stood out immediately. Subject line, timing. The body read, "Once she turns 18, it'll be harder. We need this done now." It was sent from Valora's email, forwarded to Isolde. Attached was an asset allocation plan, marked with red notes suggesting temporary adjustments to investment flows. the kind of language that screamed premeditation. I sat still, processing. They hadn't just stolen. They'd planned it like a business acquisition, like I was a delay in their agenda, a technicality they needed to manage. I created a new folder on my desktop, Inheritance Watch. I color-coded the documents. I printed the key emails. I slid them into a red binder. On the cover, in thick black ink, I wrote one word: war, because that's what it had become. They erased my past to steal my future, but I had enough left to burn them down. By midweek, the air in Charleston hung thick, but not heavier than what I carried in my chest. The flash drive had cracked open their scheme, but now I needed to split it wide. The evidence meant something, but without teeth it was just paper. Merrick texted me, "Meet me in Mount Pleasant, 9 a.m. You'll want to hear this in person." He didn't say more. He didn't need to. I arrived at a quiet cafe tucked off the main road, the kind that smelled like roasted pecans and ink-stained newspapers. The place was nearly empty, save for a few retirees flipping through the Post and Courier. Merrick stood when I walked in. Same olive sport coat, same quiet steadiness. But his eyes, they didn't carry the usual soft grief. They held something sharper. "Sit down," he said, voice low, "and let's end this politely before it gets ugly." From his briefcase, he pulled a sealed envelope and a tiny voice recorder. "Your father gave me both," he said, placing them in front of me. "Told me to hold on to them, said only to act if she ever turned on you." My fingers trembled slightly as I broke the seal. Inside, a copy of a revised will dated 1 year before his death. My name, sole heir. An addendum in bold ink. If malicious mismanagement is suspected by the acting guardian, this document shall override prior instructions. I couldn't breathe for a second. Merrick slid the recorder toward me. "And this," he said, "was captured 6 weeks before the accident, at the estate during a meeting I was supposed to attend but couldn't. One of the staff recorded it on accident. Your father made sure I got it." He pressed play. Isolde's voice filled the space between us, saccharine and sharp-edged. "She's too naive. Once I get the house in my name, she can do whatever she wants with memories." My jaw clenched. Merrick let the silence hang, then pressed play again. She said it twice. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just whispered, "This is all I needed." The sun was just rising over the marshes when I walked into the courthouse again. Different dress, same spine. I carried the red folder, my backup will, the voice file, spreadsheets marked in red. The same clerk from before looked up as I approached. "You're not the same girl from last week," she said. I met her eyes. "No," I replied. "That girl waited for someone to do the right thing. I'm done waiting." An hour later, everything was stamped, recorded, and filed. By noon, I was back at my friend's apartment, sipping stale coffee and rereading the clause in my father's revised will. The language was tight, careful, and almost cruel in its clarity. If guardianship is breached with proven manipulation, custodianship dissolves and all assets revert solely to Varel. Isolde had buried the will because she knew, because he had warned her, and now the truth was mine to use, but I wasn't going to use it in a courtroom first. I opened my laptop, created a temporary email, and sent an anonymous tip to the local news desk. Subject line, "Follow the estate money. You'll find pearls, handbags, and perjury." Then I drafted a short RSVP to a fundraising gala being hosted that weekend, one where Isolde was listed as co-chair and guest speaker. I left the name blank, but I paid for a seat. I zipped the red folder into a sleek clutch and stood in front of the mirror. This wasn't about revenge, not really. It was about refusing to live erased. I didn't plan to humiliate her. I just planned to stop pretending. The night of the gala arrived like a slow rolling wave, inevitable, steady, and impossible to ignore. Charleston glimmered beneath a velvet sky, its historic buildings glowing under strings of fairy lights and the self-congratulations of the elite. The fundraiser, hosted by Isolde and her hand-picked circle of socialites, was dressed in gold linens and forced laughter. I arrived in a navy dress my mother once wore to her own scholarship banquet, decades ago. It still carried the faint scent of lavender, her favorite soap, and it zipped up like armor. The red folder tucked beneath my arm was slim, precise, everything I needed, and nothing extra. I stepped through the entrance quietly, head high, shoes muffled against the thick carpet. A waiter glanced up, hesitated, then offered me a glass of sparkling water. I took it. No one stopped me. No one quite knew what to say. But the room shifted when I walked in. "Is that?" someone whispered behind a champagne flute. A woman I vaguely remembered from past holiday parties blinked at me like she was seeing a ghost. I nodded once. Her gaze dropped immediately. Across the ballroom, Valora posed beside a towering ice sculpture shaped like an angel. Isolde stood at her side, her makeup pristine, her smile effortless. A mask so well worn it looked like skin. I didn't walk toward them, I didn't need to. My presence alone began the unraveling. 10 minutes before the speech, I found the AV coordinator backstage. A man in a black button-up, flipping through a playlist of sponsor reels and silent auction slides. "I have a file," I said, my voice calm. "It's meant for the screen." He raised an eyebrow. "Who signed off on it?" "Someone who's about to lose their reputation if you don't play it." I handed him the USB, told him to play it 30 seconds before the opening remarks. Then I turned and walked away. As the guests returned to their seats, the lights dimmed and Valora tapped her crystal to call for attention. Isolde stood at the microphone, holding her note cards delicately. "Thank you all for being here tonight. It's because of strong communities like ours that—" The screen behind her blinked. Audio played, sharp and clear. "She's too naive. Once I get the house in my name, she can do whatever she wants with memories." Gasps, then silence. The next slide displayed spending logs. $4,800 for boutique shoes, charged under estate client support. Then the photo of the missing portrait once above the mantel. Then the revised will. No captions, just dates, signatures, facts. Isolde stood frozen. Her smile dissolved one twitch at a time. She blinked, looked for Valora, who gripped her arm and hissed, "Turn it off, now!" But no one moved. Phones came out. Some guests started recording. Others quietly gathered their things and slipped toward the exit. An older gentleman near the back leaned toward his wife and whispered, "That poor girl, all this time." Isolde's voice cracked. "That was taken out of context. This is an attack." I didn't say a word. I was already near the back, walking toward the exit. No need to yell, no need to explain. The evidence had done the speaking. 3 days later, the court ruled in my favor. Full transfer of assets. Custodianship revoked, financial restitution ordered. The judge didn't look at Isolde once, but I did. Just briefly. She wore the same beige suit she'd once worn to a church fundraiser, but it looked different now, like borrowed dignity stretched thin. Her license to manage trusts was stripped. By the end of the week, her real estate broker listed her house. A neighbor told Gwen, the housekeeper, that Isolde had been seen hauling boxes alone into a rented van. No reporters, no friends offering casseroles, just silence and cardboard. Valora posted nothing that week. I didn't gloat. I didn't throw a party. I didn't need to. I sat in my tiny borrowed guest room, opened my mother's napkin again, and placed it beside a stamped copy of the court order. They had tried to bury me with falsehoods. I didn't ruin her. She did that all by herself. I just stopped covering the wreckage. By the time the movers handed me the new set of keys, the house was no longer a battleground. It was just quiet. I didn't rush in with boxes or declarations. I came alone, late in the afternoon, wearing sneakers and carrying a single duffel bag slung over my shoulder. I unlocked the front door and pushed it open slowly, letting the air hit me before I stepped inside. It smelled like lavender and dust, like something that had once been alive, but had sat untouched too long. The hallway echoed under my bare feet. No rugs left, no furniture, just pale streaks on the wall where portraits once hung, and faint marks on the floor where chairs had stood. I walked through every room, kitchen, living room, upstairs hall. The silence wasn't threatening anymore. It felt like permission. In the center of the living room, right where the hearth still held the faint soot of winter fires past, I placed a single photograph back on the mantel. It was me, at 6 years old, grinning as I held a tiny pot of rosemary. My mother crouched beside me, her curls tucked under a bandana, her smile half-tired and fully alive. She'd written on the back, in her neat, small script, "Her hands belong to something that grows." That was all I needed to put back, nothing else. A few minutes later, I unpacked the small box I'd kept untouched since the funeral. Inside, wrapped in a soft scarf, was the folded napkin, the one my mother taught me to shape like a leaf. The edges were a little frayed now, but the creases still held. I smoothed it carefully and placed it on the dining table, centered, quiet but firm. She erased photos, spent money, told lies. I murmured to no one, "But she couldn't erase this. This is mine." I left it there. A declaration no one else would see but me. That was enough. Later that evening, after opening windows and letting in the cool air, I plugged in my phone to charge and noticed the blinking icon. One voicemail, no name, but I didn't have to guess. I tapped play and set the phone down on the counter. Isolde's voice crackled, thin and small. "I didn't mean for it to go this far. I didn't know who I was without him." There was a pause, a breath held too long. Then silence. I didn't save it. I didn't listen again. I deleted it and put the phone face down. Some people expect closure to come wrapped in apologies. I learned real closure shows up when you no longer need one. Before bed, I walked down the hallway and opened the door to the guest room. A space I'd barely stepped into as a child. It used to be storage. Forgotten holiday decorations, old books, a broken treadmill. Now it had a bed. I'd had it delivered 2 days earlier. Clean white sheets. A folded towel placed gently at the foot. And on the nightstand, a paperback copy of my mother's favorite book, The Secret Garden. Her name scribbled on the inside cover. I turned on the small lamp beside it. Soft, warm light filled the corner of the room. "For the next girl who's told she's too young to understand," I whispered, then closed the door behind me. I didn't light a fire that night. I didn't pour wine or toast myself. I just stood in the hallway of a house that no longer carried war, and breathed. My name was on the deed, but more than that, it was no longer missing from the family stories. That mattered more. Have you ever been erased and found your name again? Tell me in the comments. I read everyone.